Hello, friends. It is good to say that again. Welcome to No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fischer. I'm coming to you live from Manila, my super dark hotel room that has a lot of natural light during the daytime, but it is now 10:34 p.m. local time here, 10:34 a.m. on the East Coast, where my man, your man, everyone's man, Dan Devine is coming to me through his computer and to you through your earphones. What's up, buddy? How are you?
It's so good to see you. I'm sorry that you're in like a dungeon, but you're in a dungeon for a good purpose. You're bringing the gospel of Yahoo Sports basketball coverage to the world, and as with the FIBA World Cup. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to have you back in the big chair. It's a lot of pressure. I was there for a couple of weeks, and I felt a little bit sweaty. I hope the chair doesn't feel sweaty in Manila now that you get back into it.
It's not sweaty, but it has the remnants, like a little pungent aftershave of sweat smell that just makes you feel closer to you, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
that's the kind of friendship that everyone really strives for.
Yeah. No, it's good to be back. I've been listening to a ton of podcasts while I've been trying to work out every day to work off all of the pad thai and the pho and the bun cha and the cha ka and the banh mi that I ate through Southeast Asia before I came here on assignment. So it's great to be back doing this and doing this with you in particular, my good old buddy, my old pal. So let's get right into it. Let's skip the pleasantries. Not skip the pleasantries. We did it. Let's move past the pleasantries. Because unfortunately, we're not going to talk about Damian Lillard. We are going to talk a little bit about James Harden, but not like in the traditional sense, just because I have some hot takes, some hot jakes to talk about that, because I had a very fun experience of experiencing James Harden go through China while I was in Asia with my diehard Sixers fan brother. And it was just a really interesting experience, and I want to share it with our listeners. But first, let's definitely run through this World Cup, where earlier tonight, this afternoon, local time at 4:45 a.m. Eastern time, the U.S. moved to 3-0. They had already qualified for the second round, but as we can get into maybe later, if you need me to kind of explain how this wonky bracket works, which I think maybe this is bad to kind of spoil and tip off potential other ideas, but like, to me, this is the closest analog that I've seen to what the in-season tournament is going to kind of look like in terms of the structure of it. So I have been kind of keeping an eye on the dynamics of like the format of this tournament from that lens, and I'm going to definitely keep asking more and more people about that through that lens. But U.S. waxed Jordan 110-64 today. Not Michael Jordan, the Jordanian national team. Not Michael Jordan. That's a joke written by producer John Denaro. So if anyone was offended,
come on. Just sell the joke.
My freshman college roommate, he is Jordanian. So he was the first person to tip me off. I texted him because his dad's like worked for the embassy and he like knows people. I was like, hey, is there anyone in like affiliated with the program who's going to be in Manila that I can drink beers with when I'm here? And he was like, they're all kind of, no one that we know is there. But Rondae Hollis-Jefferson's on the team, and he indeed was on the team and has put up some crazy stats. He scored 39 against New Zealand in their last game, but he was no match for the mighty Americans. The biggest storyline of this game, though, as I wrote at Yahoo Sports, was the fact that Steve Kerr changed up the starting lineup for the first time all actual gameplay of this Team USA run, dating back to their 5 exhibition games, and even dating back to their second, I believe, inter-squad scrimmage in their Las Vegas training camp, where Josh Hart moved into the starting lineup in exchange for Brandon Ingram, which I'm not going to pat myself on the back too loudly, but I got lunch with someone who's here, part of the traveling party today, and they asked me if there's any tweaks to the rotation I'd make, and I said I would move Brandon Ingram to the bench. I would have put Cam Johnson in the starting lineup to be more of like a stretch, kind of Olympic Melo type of role, because that's what I think the idea was for Ingram. But Ingram's not really just like a stand in the corner, catch and shoot guy. He's a creator type of player. And he definitely felt more comfortable in the reserve unit today. He told me that post game in the wild pig pen that I call it. That is the mixed zone, where you have
mixed zones. Yeah.
You have camera crews from every country possible, just sticking their cameras in these players' faces, not asking questions, not being productive, just trying to take selfies and capture social content. And very mild-mannered, soft-spoken Brandon Ingram, who I have known a little bit over the years, came right up to me and spoke directly into my phone, and no one else heard him tell me, thankfully. Shout out exclusives. That Steve Kerr told him this morning that was going to happen, and that he was kind of on board because the second unit with Tyrese Halliburton definitely has like a zippier, fast pace, move the ball, run away style to it, where in the starting lineup, Ingram has kind of been a little bit lost, just banished to the corner almost, watching Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brunson take turns doing high screen action with Jaren Jackson. So Josh Hart comes in, 3 Villanova teammates. That synergy is definitely still there between him and Mikal Bridges and Jalen Brunson. Obviously, Hart and Jalen Brunson are together in New York, and that could be a good sign for Dante DiVincenzo coming to the Knicks, seeing just how well those guys are still playing together. You didn't see today's game, Dan, but you have been following from afar. After my opening preamble, what say you about the mighty Americans, who are now 3-0 and will face Montenegro and then Lithuania in the second round of the 2023 FIBA World Cup in what they are calling Group J for Jake. No, not for Jake, but Group J.
You have to name the whole thing after you. My first thought was, we're still sort of waiting to see, or it seems like, and you have a different experience being closer. It seems like we're still sort of waiting for the establishment of who's, quote unquote, the guy. There's been different lead scorers every game of these first 3 games. Anthony Edwards, obviously a big game today, 22 points in 19 minutes, and sort of took the step forward where a lot of people had looked at him and said, is he going to be that, sort of lead wing scorer that pretty much every other American team has had in years past? The Ingram thing, I think you're right. Obviously, it's the biggest functional point because it suggests a shift to how they're going to play moving forward, or at least doubling down on what has been a really successful
Let me stop you there, because Steve Kerr was very clear tonight in his post-game saying that they were not committing full-time to this change. However, I am not expecting, Brandon Ingram was on board with it. Everyone else seemed to be on board with it. I can't imagine they're just going to change it up after changing it up,
Well, yeah. And so, with Ingram in particular, I know he's spoken to Joe Varden at The Athletic. I'm not sure if he spoke to other people about it, but that feeling of, frustration of this is a dramatically different role, as you said, sort of being the spot up guy in the corner and the complementary player. If you're in that kind of situation, finding a role in the second unit that does play with a better pace, that does sort of share the ball a little bit more, seemed to pay immediate dividends for him. He'd only had 7 points on 3 for 8 shooting across the first 2 games, 7 points and 5 assists in 15 minutes with the second unit in this game against Jordan. So it seems like he quickly found a comfort level, and it helps the first unit make a little bit more sense too. Like, you're removing a guy who is used to being a number 1 option shot creator, and you're putting in a kind of connector plug and play guy like Josh Hart, playing a very similar role to what he did alongside Brunson in New York. It clarifies things more. Jaren Jackson's going to be the screen and dive guy. Mikal Bridges is going to sort of space the floor more readily. Josh Hart is going to cut and screen and do a lot of dirty work stuff. And then you're going to have the ball in the hands of Brunson and Anthony Edwards more often than not. And so it sort of simplifies everybody's roles while also giving Ingram more of a chance to find his rhythm in a second unit that's just been absolutely gangbusters so far. But the big takeaway that I have going forward is it seems like a really fluid Team USA. The size question is one that I think we're going to see resolved maybe a little bit more in these next sort of group stage games, where you're looking at Lithuania and Montenegro that have NBA caliber bigs, or not NBA caliber, starting NBA bigs, star level NBA bigs. And we're going to find out if Jaren Jackson Jr. is sort of equal to that task. If it's more of a Walker Kessler situation, Paolo Banchero is a small ball 5, you wrote about after that first game against New Zealand. We're going to find out if the way that Steve Kerr wants to play sort of smaller, zippier, switchier is going to hold up in that against those FIBA bigs. But I think you have to be encouraged by what you've seen so far, especially with this lineup change kind of getting everybody unlocked a little bit today.
Yeah, this has kind of been a tale of two teams. And Steve Kerr has said it time and again and again and again as my headphones are falling off my head. He has said that this is a 12-man team. They have 12 starters, and their depth is what is their biggest strength against any foe they're going to face. Canada's got as much depth as they do, probably, maybe a little bit less. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Not too long, because I don't want to go too long on this, even though I'm here and I'm grateful that Yahoo has sent me here. We're going to talk about some other stuff too.
Yeah, we're going to get our money's worth out of this trip, Jake. I know you've been writing a lot, and I appreciate that. But we are going to talk a little bit about this.
I've written every day.
Oh,
I got Jonas Valanciunas. I got a nice exclusive with Nikola Vucevic coming tomorrow. Spoiler alert. It's been very, very, very interesting to see how different this team plays with Tyrese Halliburton's bench and Jalen Brunson starters. That's like the thing that was at the bedrock of Brandon Ingram moving to the reserve unit. Brunson is the captain of this team. He was the MVP of the U19 FIBA tournament, whatever year it was. Forgive me, I don't remember off the top of my head. Sometime before he entered the NBA. And he is that type of... He reminds me of a little bit of Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts in the way that he's got the quiet swag. He's that dude. But he's also definitely like humbled with it too. And he's that type of like program culture, character building type of guy that Steve Kerr wanted to put that C on his chest, not literally, but figuratively. And it's just, he's a downhill scorer. And to get your team in the flow of the offense, it hasn't been as natural until tonight against Jordan, who was the worst team that the U.S. has played. They haven't gotten off to quick starts. So I'll be curious if Josh Hart is the right one. Like I said, I think having a stretchier shooter like Cam Johnson might end up proving to be the more advantageous fifth guy when you have him and Ant. And they're two of the best scorers in the NBA. Jalen Brunson did it in the playoffs 2 years in a row, and I watched him stave off elimination next to you in Madison Square Garden against the Miami Heat. And the dude is just damn impressive when he puts his head down and turns the corner and decides, I don't care who's in front of me. I've got Euro steps and shoulder bumps and head fakes and pivots and all that I'm just going to float this layup over you. I don't really care what's in front of you. He said it to me post-game against Greece 2 days ago, because they played Greece in the exhibition stretch, and Thomas Walkup, the Stephen F. Austin alum, who is turned into, from people I've talked to here, apparently he's like arguably the best perimeter defender in all of EuroLeague. And for Brunson to kind of just make him lunch meat was pretty impressive. And he said, it's all about just taking what the defense gives me. Like I don't have a premeditated move. That's why it's so, now I'm kind of ad-libbing, but that's why it's so reactionary and doesn't seem so like when Anthony Edwards is driving, he's been stripped a bunch here because you kind of can tell when he's leading one direction. He's just leading one direction to set you up to Euro step the other way. Brunson has a lot more in his bag in that regard of their games. Ant's got a little bit more in his bag elsewhere, just also because he's 6'4" and gigantic and can jump through buildings. But I don't know. I'm curious when this team faces tougher competition. To your point, they will have Montenegro and Lithuania, like we talked about. It's not just Vucevic and Valanciunas. They both have. There's a lot of talent behind those guys. I don't want to start listing names and butcher names, but I know one name I will definitely know that I can say is Iggy Brzezikas, who played at Michigan, played on the Knicks. He's not even like
Donatas Motiejunas too, right?
He's the back. Yeah. He's the backup five for Lithuania. I'm not even like he's a great backup five to have in this tournament, but the 4 out that Lithuania plays around. I went to Montenegro versus Lithuania last night to scout for the matchup that US will face. They just have dudes, man. Lithuania is the team I'm personally, and an NBA executive who's in attendance agreed with me. I'm a little concerned that the US hasn't really had any real resistance. Yeah, you can talk about the Germany game, but that was an exhibition game. Like,
sure.
It's not the same thing when literally all these points matter, because the point differential will be the tiebreaker once you get into these, there'll be 4 teams in their next group. US, I don't even know who won. I'll check, whatever. It's the winner of Greece and New Zealand, who just finished up just now. And then Montenegro, Lithuania. They only play 2 games in the next round, and your record plus your point differential will help you get into the knockout phase. So it is cool about this tournament, running up the score, which is like considered to be, not sportsmanlike and whatever, is kind of what the deal is here. Honestly, man, I love FIBA. Like, the 40-minute game is sweet. There's a lot of things about the organization of the event of FIBA that I could talk about off air and complain about, but the style of the game, the defensive 3 seconds and the goaltending thing get all the attention. But just like the energy in the gym, the fact that, I went up to the 400 level and hung out with the Pelargoi, the Greek official fan club, with their drum, and the Lithuanians just singing their chants, Lietuva, Lietuva. And the no TV timeouts, like, it is fun here, man. And the US just haven't really had any type of resistance yet. Whereas across the bracket, you've got Australia having to like dig their way into this next round, and France is out. Spain had to beat Brazil today to make sure they got in there. And it's just, I wonder when the first thing of adversity strikes in this tournament, not in exhibition games when they don't matter. When the pressure's on, Anthony Edwards said tonight he doesn't feel pressure, but that's Anthony Edwards. Like, some guys might. When you are the US and your only expectation is to win gold and everyone else is coming for your throat because you are the top dog, I'm eager to see them play in a more adverse situation than they have seen so far through their first 3 games. And I wonder, to bring this back, what that stylistic difference between Jalen Brunson's Team USA and Tyrese Halliburton's Team USA will look like in those moments.
I think there's still 2 things off that. One is, I imagine Steve Kerr's point of view is it doesn't necessarily matter, because the goal, like, it's not one of starting, starters versus bench. It's what the waves of those 2 units do to an opponent over the course of 40 minutes. You mentioned Canada earlier. Was watching their game. And I was on vacation for the first part of the tournament, the first few games. I'm kind of catching up to speed now. But watching Canada versus Latvia yesterday, you saw like Latvia got off to a hot start. They were hitting threes, and they were being really physical with Canada. Canada did not get off to a good start. They went to their bench. That also didn't go super well. You mentioned the depth. They don't go 10 or 12 deep in NBA talent. There's still some really good players and some European players, some really good Canadian players, but it's not the same as Team USA. So, but as you're watching it, it's like 25 or so really good minutes for Latvia, but just dealing with the talent and the physicality of NBA athletes for 40 full minutes and the waves of the Canadian roster, it just eventually it broke Latvia apart, and SGA just started taking everybody apart. That's what Team USA is doing, or the goal or the construction of it is like, if your starters play even, obviously that's not ideal. You'd prefer to have what happened against Jordan, where it's a 20-4 start. But when you go to your second unit, nobody is going to be able to keep up with what Team USA is dealing with in the second unit, and where you're throwing Halliburton and Austin Reeves, and whether it was from Hart to Ingram to Banchero, like the talent level and the speed and the athleticism, the length and the size in that second unit is just unparalleled. So from Kerr's perspective, I imagine the goal is, it's not necessarily how do we, what do we maximize the first 5? It's how do we maximize our chance of just breaking these teams apart the longer the game goes on, by making them deal with our physicality, our athleticism, and our talent. And then the second question that I have is, you talked about various paths to synergy. There's the Villanova connection. There's if you've got Bridges playing alongside Cameron Johnson, obviously all their time together in Phoenix and now in Brooklyn. what I'm wondering is there another Philly guy that we can throw with Jalen Brunson? Somebody else who's maybe played with him in the past? Somebody who's got some connection from youth basketball who might be in the Philly? Can you think of anybody who might fit that bill?
Yeah, there's one guy that comes to mind, and
what's his name?
Currently has his name's. I don't want to talk about myself in the third person. Look, one of the most fun things about being here is that the access to these guys has been pretty second to none. It feels like a morning shoot around. Most of our listeners won't get this because they're not reporters such as ourselves, but some people will. It feels like a morning shoot around pre-pandemic when the team is on a 15-game winning streak and they're in town for a couple of days. Like, everyone's in a good mood. Literally, when you walk into the gym at their hotel, which I will not say because it is effing crazy to me how many people still somehow find out where this team is staying and they are hounding people for autographs and selfies. Also, the amount of selfies that I've seen and requested, I've understood like selfie culture is taking over our country and our world, but like, people want selfies. They don't want autographs. They don't want to take pictures of things. They want to be in the picture with you. And it feels bizarre to me. But yeah, it's been cool to walk up to Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and be like, hey, I wasn't around that much second half of the year, but like, I live in Brooklyn, I'm going to be around. And they'd be like, oh yeah, like, where do you live? Any restaurants recommendations? I went to Villanova camp as a kid. I was definitely a Villanova fan growing up. I played with Jalen Brunson on second grade Sixers camp at Rosa International Middle School. And I haven't really, even though he's a Knick and lives in New York, I haven't really had a chance to like wade through the Manhattan media scene and the Knicks PR arm to get such intimate access to him. And it'd be like, yo man, by the way, like, you're not going to remember, but yeah, we were on that team together. But being in Manila just adds like a different element to all the connections and the time spent here. So thank you for bringing up the fact that I played basketball with Jalen Brunson in 2002. He's definitely much better than me.
I mean, as I understand it, you've yet to make a declaration of which nation you would represent in international play. So, like, I'm just saying, if we got to a point where, you know, whether it's injuries or ailments, you know, obviously nobody's rooting for any of that, but it would be nice to know that there's a complimentary shooter who's already got some experience with Jalen Brunson that could come in potentially off the bench for the red, white, and blue. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. That's sure. They would definitely, FIBA would probably blow their gasket at how I could walk past certain areas that my little credential doesn't let me get to. But that's neither here nor there. I just want to give, before we get out of the FIBA segment, I want to give some shout outs to the other undefeated teams. Karl Anthony Towns' Dominican Republic has a lot of familiar faces. Speaking of Nova, shout out Antonio Pena, Lester Quinones, if I butchered that. I mean, I definitely butchered that. Yeah. I apologize. The young Warriors
on a two-way with the Warriors. Yeah.
He's doing some good things out here. Serbia, man, Nikola Jovic has not missed a three. He maybe has missed one or two, but like the dude literally went 5 for 5 tonight. He's been on fire to the point where, like, maybe the idea of him and Tyler Hero and so for Dame isn't so crazy. No, I don't want to get too far. I was going to say,
you got like Andy Ellisberg just making sure he's sending the Courtyard 1891 links to Joe Cronin. Like, yo, check it. Did you check out the Serbia game?
Yeah. Germany with Franz Wagner dealing with an ankle injury, I believe. I'm going to go with, just because I don't know for sure off the top of my head, I'm going to go with lower body injury. Shout out hockey. He's definitely, I don't want to formally report anything, but his status is definitely shaky, which is going to be tough for the Germans and tough for basketball fans, because I really did think that they were probably the best team when healthy once Jamal Murray was checked out of the Canadian program, which Canada, to that point, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Kelly Olynyk might be the greatest basketball player of all time when he puts on that red and white uniform. Dylan Brooks, for all his foibles, I mean, he's a really valuable defensive player to have in FIBA, where you're allowed to beat the living crap out of people when they're not shooting. If you go in the lane and breathe on someone, the refs are calling a foul. But on the perimeter, when someone's dribbling, there's a lot of stuff that you're allowed to get away with. A bunch of hand checking and shoulder bumps and stuff. And like, if Canada does play Team USA in the championship game, Dylan Brooks is going to get it to some skirmish or two, and it's going to be very great fodder for NBA X, are we calling it now? I mean, I know it's called X, but what are we calling it?
We're simply not calling it that.
Just because we've dabbled in getting, like, literally when I click X on my phone, I feel like I'm loading a porn website. Like it's just a disgustingly, like, it looks terrible. It looks like it would be not suitable for work app, and it isn't, because no one should be on Twitter aside from
all right.
clicking links to Yahoo Sports articles.
Move
Slovenia is the
FIBA
other
conversation.
Yeah, Slovenia is the other 3-0 team, and Spain as well. Shout out Silver Fox, Rudy Fernandez. He's still out there, still getting buckets. Slovenia with Luka. I mean, they've got Zoran Dragic as well. They've got a bunch of other dudes who knock down threes when Luka finds them in the weak side.
I've got a fun name for everybody. Somebody to pay attention to there. Klemen Prepelic plays in the ACB in Spain and was knocking down threes like crazy today. Like, that's a guy that they're going to set the table for. Like, Luka has targets to hit. So that group, you mentioned the as we move on to the next stage, that group K, Germany, Australia, Slovenia, Georgia. That's a tough, like,
really tough.
Because Australia has looked good, but then they dropped a winnable game the other day. Like that as we move forward through the tournament, like, that's going to be tough to get out of. We've got a team that could wind up being a finalist, might wind up by the wayside there in that group.
I'm just going to reveal my bias. I want Australia to make it to Manila because I want to drink beer with the coaching staff. So we're rooting for the Aussies. But yeah, they've got a tough path. As I wrote at the end of my article today, this is the last thing we'll say, and then we'll take a break. Like, shout out to the DR and Serbia for their 3-0 records. But there are 5 teams that were power ranked in the top 7 of this tournament on the other side of the bracket that the U.S. just don't have to face. It's remarkable. It is remarkable how easy, by comparison, by relativity, the Americans' path will be to the gold medal game compared to what those other teams are going to have to face, being that Giannis is out with a knee, surgery recovery, Jokic is not here, even, Domantas Sabonis is not playing for Lithuania. The Americans got a really nice break, and even like teams like, to get a little wonky, the Dominican Republic and Serbia have been playing in another gym here in Manila, Araneta Coliseum. And the Dominican Republic played their first game in a different arena that was like special for Philippines because they played against the host nation Philippines. The U.S. has been at this swanky hotel playing in the same gym that they'll be playing in the entire tournament. Maybe it's American exceptionalism. Maybe it's just the luck of the draw. But Team USA has had by far the easiest path, and they will have by far the easiest path. So it's just up to them to take care of business when the going gets a little bit tougher here. That's it for now for Manila. Well, I'm still going to be talking to you from Manila, but the content about Manila, we're going to take a quick break and come back to get into a little bit of the juicier off-season rumory type stuff. Welcome back to No Cap Room. We're going to take a step on the superstar treadmill where maybe it's a merry-go-round, where once you come up into the news cycle of will you ask for a trade, will you ask out, blah, 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 you're always coming back around again. Giannis Antetokounmpo threw himself into this conversation with comments, I believe, last week. I don't remember when exactly they were. Time zones are screwing with my head. But recently...
Last week is safe.
Last week to the New York Times saying, quote, many things, but this is the big one. Winning a championship comes first. I don't want to be 20 years on the same team and don't win another championship. He is also not going to be signing an extension now because he wants to see what happens with Adrian Griffin and this season. So I've got some stuff to say, but I was rambling a lot before the break, apparently. So Dan, I'm going to pass it to you. And I'm curious what your reaction was upon reading these inflammatory, per se, thoughts that Giannis entered into the ether.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like because the setup for this interview was more like a feature story and photo shoot on Giannis's like off the court ambitions and setting up companies with his brothers and stuff like that. But the thing, and smartly to Tanya Ganguly at the Times and her editors were like, no, the thing that needs to be up at the top of this is two-time MVP, world champion, finals, or NBA champion. Sorry, that's a whole other discourse we don't need to get into. NBA champion, finals MVP is saying like he's not necessarily committed for the long term for the sake of loyalty because winning has to trump all. Like that is it's the kind of thing that reverberates around the league because there are only so many of these guys that are best player on a championship team caliber players who have proven it, who are not just NBA 75 players, but like going to go down as, a much shorter list than that when all's said and done. And Giannis is one of those guys, peak of his career, prime of his physical abilities. And if that guy is saying there's a chance I could be, available if my team doesn't do everything possible to pull out every stop to compete, that changes the way everything works. It in the same way it changed the way the league operated 3 or 4 years ago when it looked like there were questions about would he sign the Supermax if the Bucks didn't get over the hump, and make it past the second round of the playoffs, make it all the way to a championship. It changes fundamentally the way front offices approach their own team building and their own asset management and everything else, because if you got a shot at that guy, that can change everything for you. So my first takeaway was like, this is the kind of thing that not just structures news cycles, but can structure like transaction cycles and dramatically shift planning. The second reaction is like, we're also a long way away from that, right? Giannis, the initial, like the context of the remarks is like, why would Giannis not sign a 3-year, $171 million extension as soon as he's eligible to this summer? It's because, well, with the salary cap going up and with the opportunity for him to keep, he's going to make the 35% of the salary cap max because he's got 10 years of service time. The salary cap is projected to keep going up like 10% year over year. There's the forthcoming new broadcast rights deal, which everyone expects to be huge. So the maximum amount he can make is going to go up, up, up the longer he waits to sign a new deal. So that's the sort of the staging or the context of why he wouldn't extend right away. Then he chose to say also, quote, sorry, let me get it out in front of me. I would not be the best version of myself if I don't know that everybody's on the same page, everybody's going for a championship, everybody's going to sacrifice time away from their family like I do. And if I don't feel that, I'm not signing. That's not just the numbers need to make sense. That's the organization. I need to feel like this organization is doing everything possible to make me another champion or to put me in position to win another championship. And that's different than just money. And so that's whether it's a shot across the bow at the Bucks or not, having that out there on the record so starkly strikes me as a big deal.
Yeah, I hear you. I just want to throw some cold water on it. I do. Because there's no way that the Bucks and John Horst front office are not aware of this. They were just in this situation 3 years ago in August, September, whenever it was, 2020. I remember I was in my parents' bedroom when they were about to sell my childhood home, writing a story at Bleacher Report about the final tinkering and decision-making that Giannis's team was doing before they signed the Supermax, after they traded for Drew Holiday and so on and so forth. Like, they've been on Giannis watch since then. And from there through now, Horst and Giannis's representation, Alex Saratzis at Octagon Sports, I am aware that they are pretty close and have a really good working relationship. Like, this isn't, to me, James Harden firing surprise shots across the bow at the Sixers and Daryl Morey and like, oh, here's some comment you're gonna wake up to this, and big old pile of poop on your front porch you gotta go deal with now. Like, I think this is just something, maybe a tip of the iceberg coming up, that the iceberg underneath is something that everyone involved has just been very aware of for a long, long time here. It's a $70 million difference of him waiting for the extension, first of all. He could decline his player option right now, according to a couple of capish people I have texted today. And he could sign that 3-year, 170-ish figure that he talked about. Or he can just wait until next season, and then it's a 4-year, $233-ish million deal. So that's a big difference right there. Forget about that stuff, because I think that's just simple addition and subtraction. The comments about like where he's going to go, or he could go if he doesn't do this. And then I saw, the Lakers are going to come up always. And like someone here was telling me, oh, like look out for Golden State. I don't want to play the game of trying to draw the line of, the big bad mainstream media trying to force a superstar asking out and drawing up scenarios. But the relevant information I will bring from, I remember I wrote this at Bleacher Report at the time, from my parents' bedroom before they sold that house. He was looking at Miami.
Were they like trying to sell it out from under you? Did we need to get like the jaws of life to remove
lived in New
you
York.
from?
No, I went home to help them pack up, and my mom wanted to do an insanely long garage sale, which the fact that anyone does a garage sale in 2023 is hilarious to me, but it was a fun time. I know Miami and Dallas were the two spots that he was looking at then. Miami would be complicated if they do pull off this Damian Lillard trade. Dallas's flexibility, which this will be a good segue into our next guy, is a little bit trickier now that they traded a lot for Kyrie Irving. Not so much, but a lot, relatively speaking, compared to what was left in their cupboard, because they let Jalen Brunson walk for nothing to get Kyrie Irving next to Luka. So I don't really know. Like, the obvious exit ramps that he was definitely looking at and calculating what a 4-year deal in Texas and Florida with state income tax looked like compared to a 5-year supermax in the state of Wisconsin. Like, that was the type of nitty gritty that I know was being evaluated and analyzed back in 2020. There's no obvious situation. Plus, like, time and again, I have only heard, and he said it in that interview with the New York Times, he loves Milwaukee. He loves being the dude in Milwaukee. He loves being the guy who was like Dirk and was like Kobe and is like them right now. He just wants to do it again. So it's just going to be a matter of, and like the Bucks did what they had to do. They brought back Chris Middleton to a number that probably was lower than what Chris Middleton would have liked. The Brook Lopez signing was one of the more interesting things. I would love to inject truth serum into everyone around that situation, because the Rockets certainly think they had Brook Lopez coming, and the Bucks ended up bringing Brook Lopez back at a much higher number that was definitely influenced by the number that the Rockets were willing to give him, but they ponied up and put their chips on the table, and they have locked into this group, and they were the number 1 seed last year. So we'll see what happens with Adrian Griffin getting a shot. But that was the coach that Giannis wanted to hire. He was brought in. I believe Chris Middleton was involved as well in those final rounds of meeting with the final candidates. And Adrian Griffin was the guy that Giannis Antetokounmpo stamped by all accounts. So that's all to say, like, it's Giannis. He said these inflammatory comments. We're talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. I'm just not so certain that it's going to be a thing that actually comes to bear. Luka, that clock is definitely ticking. He has not really floated that out there yet, which to me is more of like he's got a trump card still left to play. And I'm not trying to be the guy that is trying to say, oh, this is the next superstar to request a trade.
Right.
But there are people around Luka and people around Dallas who told me the second they traded for Kyrie Irving, they immediately started that clock even faster. Because when you play your cards and you empty your hand and you have less cards to play, that is just gravity, physics, whatever. Like, it just is what it is. So he's still only 24. He's entering the second year of a 5-year deal. But of all these guys, anyone who could fill in the blank of this Mad Libs equation of superstars becoming available, Luka's the youngest. He's the one who hasn't won. I mean, Joel Embiid hasn't either, but Joel's 30. Someone I heard in a podcast was like, Joel Embiid's turning 30 in March. He's going to have to really consider his life and, whatever. I'm like, man, Joel Embiid's 8 days older than me, man. I don't know about that. Let's not make this so drastic. But in terms of his NBA career, yes. But with Luka, it's just their optionality of getting around him if the Kyrie thing doesn't work. And I'm just going to tell you a secret, Dan, just you and me. No one else is talking. It's you and I. It didn't really work that well last year. So that's, to me, of anyone looking at any of these situations of franchises with superstars at stake and what could happen, it's Dallas and Luka, to me, that is the most interesting one. I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately by the next trade deadline or whatever, but he's perpetually the, favorite to win MVP every season because people just are assuming it's going to be his time to take over. Luka's the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, the age is the point that you brought up. Like, if you're the kind of team that has, stockpiled 1 million assets and you're looking at who do we want to go all in on as this is going to be the standard bearer for our organization for the next half decade or whatever. A 24, 25-year-old Luka is a much more attractive, or you can see the runway a little bit more than a 29-year-old Giannis who has had, quiet as it's kept. We haven't really talked much about it, but he had back issues last year. He's had the knee issues, different sprained knees multiple times. He's also bounced back remarkably quickly from those because he's just a marvel of, biology and everything. And then Embiid, who has, been roughly as healthy as Giannis the last few years. Obviously, the front-loaded foot injuries the first couple of years of his career, but, going to be 30, has had his own history of injuries. And Luka is, younger and a primary ball handler, a creator, a shooter, all the things that you would want as a, apex wing kind of player to build around moving forward. You can understand that being if you were lining up and saying, who do I want to throw everything I have? If I've got to go all in for one of these guys, you can understand the argument for Luka. Not to be in the business of just all throwing cold water. The fact that he's entering year 2 of a 5-year deal, fully guaranteed, not just this season, but the 2 after it. He doesn't even get to the player option until 2026, 27. So obviously, the deal is over essentially when the talent says it's over at this point. The way that we've moved in the NBA is having 2 years left on your deal is no impediment, or it doesn't necessarily have to be an impediment. Having 4 years left, like Dame, that's where it gets to be a little bit trickier in terms of getting where you want to go. So that's why, you mentioned the Kyrie deal being sort of the accelerator on the clock for Dallas. They have done from that point. Now, we've talked about this before. Reasonable people can disagree over whether that move made sense, whether it was a panic decision, whether it was something that they felt like they were compelled to do because they were looking at this looming specter of Luka being upset or moving his way out. They've done everything since then that they can to try to make it make sense. Bringing in more wing talent, bringing in the draft picks that they made where they're able to move things around and bring in Derek Lively II, bring in Rashawn Holmes to sort of remake their center rotation. They go and they get Omax Prosper, sort of big 3-and-D wing that a lot of people like. They've reorganized reoriented their rotation a little bit to be a little bit younger. Dante Exum, I think, is kind of a neat lottery ticket for them. The big move, obviously, the sign and trade for Grant Williams. They've done what they can to fortify the roster to kind of put the Kyrie Luka combination in position to say, this should work. Now it's up to you guys to show us that it works, because then if it doesn't, then we've got bigger problems and we got to figure it out from there. But yeah, when you look at who are the guys that are like rainmakers that the whole league's going to take notice, Giannis, because he's done it on the highest level before, 2-time MVP, champion, etc. He's going to make everything stop. If Luka said something like what Giannis just said, he would be another one very much in that capacity because the whole league would be lining up.
The next guy we have on our list is Joel Embiid. I don't want to talk about him too long because I don't think he's requesting a trade anytime soon. The Harden stuff, I have some silly things to say about James Harden and some important things to say about James. I just haven't been able to talk on a microphone. I've been rambling. I've been overstimulated, but it's fun to be back and talking hoops, man. Embiid and the Knicks and blah, blah, blah. Like, the Sixers are just way too confident that he's sticking around. They are parroting the company line that he was very intrigued by Nick Nurse and what they can do and yada, yada, yada. He loves Tyrese Maxey. I know that to be true. They're a thick as thieves, big brother, little brother thing that could never be broken. I don't think he's on the precipice as much as people are painting it to be. He took out his Twitter bio stuff and the guy is a troll. He loves effing with you. He loves effing with Sixers fans like my brother who, man. So I'm going into it. I have a notepad on my phone titled pod riffing ... where I was just jotting down silly things to say once I got back. Because the thing was, when I first saw the James Harden liar video, which I know is like super old by now, but just bear with me. Like, I thought it was so hilarious because I knew, not to puff my chest out, I was the first person to write that he was going to be pulling some to try to get out of Philly. That like he was going to be doing this stuff. And like the Fatsu Instagram story that then he deleted, that like, I don't know. People keep asking me here, like, what's going to happen with James Harden in Philly? And this, I don't know, because like he's capable of anything. Like they are prepared to do what they can to get out of. I don't know what it's going to be. It's exciting from a sheer dramatic standpoint. Like the script writers couldn't script anything better than James Harden being, I don't want to say disgruntled because Kyrie Irving will get mad at me, but it's just exciting that someone who is capable of, he's like the Joker. He just wants to watch the world burn, and it is going to be a delight. But to see him then, we were on a dinner cruise in Bangkok, going through the river, looking at the temples, and there was this Vietnamese pop song that came on called Seaton. And there was this group of like 100 kids that had come. This was like their award for some like math competition. And they like stormed the stage where a terrible cabaret show took place to like do the TikTok dance of this song.
Why is the cabaret show catching strays? Why do we need to do this?
It was bad, bro. It was really bad. But there was an unlimited tap of Chang beer that made it all very, very entertaining.
Sure.
And then the next day to then see Harden doing that dance after calling Daryl Morey a liar, not giving any crap at all, was just amazing. And my brother and all the Sixers fans I know who are complaining about, why does James Harden still act like he's a superstar at the top of his game? This is why. He goes to China and the whole world is in his palm. He can ride a motorcycle into a stadium and dance TikTok dances and sell 10,000 bottles of wine in a second and be treated like a god. That is why James Harden still believes. I don't want to speak for James Harden, but come on, when you go to a foreign country and literally tens of thousands of people kiss the ground you walk on, buy your alcohol, and just want to take selfies and do TikTok dances with you and treat you like you are the second coming of Jesus Christ himself, I understand why he would think, I want to go to the Clippers. I'm just going to decide I want to go to the Clippers and the Sixers are going to trade me to the Sixers. Like, that is the psyche from my vantage point behind this type of stuff. Like, come on, man. He is a superstar by every definition of the world. Maybe not by dexterity and athleticism on the court in the playoffs in Game 7 when it matters. But in terms of superstardom, in terms on the scale of Stephon Marbury having a Broadway show about him in China, not Broadway, you know what I'm saying? A theatrical performance in China. James Harden is a goddamn superstar, and he can goddamn act like it. That's my hot take.
We slid so seamlessly into that hot take. I didn't see the level of passion coming. Couple of thoughts. One, like the Joker, Harden also set a big pile of money on fire to set a message, but I'm not really sure what the message is at this point. I'm not entirely sure.
The message has just been, I can set a big pile of money on fire. Watch me. That's been it.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there's the difference that you just, or the distinction you just made is an important one, because from an NBA, coverage and fan perspective or whatever, we look at the guy who was on the floor last year and say, like, that's not a superstar in the NBA. That is a, near all-star. I think there was an argument to be made for him being an all-NBA selection, leading the league in assists, averaging more than 20 points and 10 assists a game. The efficiency that he shot it with throughout the regular season, the role he played in Embiid having the MVP season, how efficient their two-man game is, yada, yada, yada. He was super important, but you say, like, that's more of like an all-star than a superstar. But stardom is not about production, right? Like, you could say that Domantas Sabonis was a more productive player on the court than James Harden last year, but James Harden is a superstar and Domantas Sabonis isn't, because he has that international cachet. As you mentioned, I guess he can sell a whole lot of wine. So if you operate from a self-image of this is who, like, all of these people cheering me and doing everything here, like, I can't possibly be wrong. Or like, of course I should get what I want in perpetuity because this is still happening. Like, it hasn't gotten quiet for him globally. So maybe I don't know if the answer to this is like eventually he makes $70 million to play in Saudi Arabia when they get their act together and start poaching guys, or if it's, he goes and he establishes that pathway in China or whatever. I'm curious to see if it actually manifests in him getting the move he wants on the NBA level, because in that context, if he was that guy and the Clippers wanted him that bad, this probably would already be done. But they don't have what it takes for Philly for it to be worth Philly's while. They haven't felt compelled to go out and get more stuff to give to Philly to make it worth their while. And so we find ourselves here where James Harden is going to have to continue, do perpetually grander and grander stunts across the world to make it happen. And I don't know that it's going to, but I think it's interesting. You're right to say, like, if I see myself as a superstar, but everybody else doesn't, I'm still going to act in a way that's like, I deserve to get whatever I want. And then what happens when that meets a harder reality in terms of what the outside perception of you is?
It's been a remarkable masterclass of acting like a reality TV star in reality. That is his reality. It's incredible to watch. I'm truly not hating on it. It has been a impressive thing to behold, and like watching it unfold while I was in Asia on vacation, not having to care about it from a professional standpoint, with my brother who just like really cared, was just such a delight, and I wanted to talk about it here. We're running out of time. I want to give you one travel story. It's not going to be about feeding the elephants at the elephant sanctuary outside of Chiang Mai. This is going to be
it kind of is, because you just did that. Like, you just sort of slipped that one in real quick. That's okay. That's like a story. Call it an end one. All right.
That's what people do for Instagram. But here's a really good Instagram versus reality story for you. Okay. So went to Thailand first with my lady, then an island, Koh Lanta. Then my brother and sister joined us in Phuket. We went to Chiang Mai, went to Bangkok. The girls left. The brothers, the boys. We were going to go to Vietnam. We did go to Vietnam, but we had a hiccup. We get to the airport, and I guess I just was so focused and concerned about first getting to Thailand and then getting to the Philippines to do my job. I did not look about the visa requirements to get to Vietnam. So as we're checking in for our flight, checking in at probably like 8:30, 10:30 flight, The energy's high. We went to a Muay Thai fight, sat ringside, and it was hilarious and fun and incredible. I had a custom tailor guy come to our hotel room at like 11:30 p.m. the night before while we were definitely not sober and try on the final fittings. They look great. Gonna have more fun suit pictures to text you and John Gennaro.
Okay.
At weddings.
I was gonna say for what? You've got some tailor.
For what?
Right,
I have too many weddings to go. I have so many. I got some suits. I got some shirts. I'm looking good. If Team USA does make it to the gold medal game, I promise you I will wear my new mustard yellow suit to Mall of Asia Arena for the gold.
We all await with bated breath. All right.
With those custom suits in hand, in suitcase, we go to check into our flight and we show the confirmation code for the flight. And the lady says, "Oh, and can I see your visa?" I just went, "Oh." So I texted a friend who is one of those couch surfer dudes who doesn't really have a real job and never really has a lease and is always just traveling for the cheapest amount of money possible, finding 18-bedroom dorm hostels for $3 a night to travel. And he says, "Oh, why don't you go online and get an e-visa expedited?" So we do that. And for like $30 extra, we could also pay for like expedited thing on the ground there with like private transportation, whatever. So before we even so now we have to book our first flight because we missed our first while we're waiting for the visa to process.
Sure.
So technology is amazing, but we go to the gate or the ticket counter, the check-in counter, and the guy there says, "You can't buy your flight for us here. You have to do it on the website." But it was like too close to the takeoff time for this flight that they wouldn't process our thing. So they wouldn't take I literally said to like, you don't want our money. Like, you're refusing to take our money. This is an empty flight. He was like, "It's out of my hands." So we finally end up getting on the second flight with our e-visa that was processed in like 77 minutes. Shout out Luka Doncic. The fact that we could email a country and be like, "We don't have a visa to get in. We need it now." They were like, "Yeah, just give us a couple extra dollars and we'll not only let you in, we will meet you when the second you land and we will expedite you through customs past like an hour-long line and have a private car for you to your hotel, all for like $100. I just want to say anything is possible. Don't ever give up on your travel itinerary, even if you are trying to go into another foreign country and you don't have the tools to get in. If you have a decent budget,
when you have money. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a decent budget, money could do anything. So that is my story of the day.
Yeah. Jake, this whole story boils down to having money is good. Like that is what we're dealing with here. Also, you're like, technology is amazing. Having money when you're traveling internationally is amazing. And you still found a way to complain about the plane. You were like, I don't, but I mean, come on. You're not gonna...
The fact they wouldn't take our money to buy the ticket was ridiculous.
Right. So I guess what I came into this podcast recording ready to celebrate Jake Fischer, man of the people, international traveler, people's insider, and like global citizen, really. And what we leave with is
like I have become one.
Jake Fischer, ugly American capitalist pig. And really, it's a sad state of affairs, really.
Here's what my brother said once we finally got the stamp on our passport and we were in Vietnam. He said, and I quote, "Money talks, bullshit walks." And for that, thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of No Cap Room. Thanks to John Gennaro, our producer, for doing all the things he does to make the show look and sound great. Please follow us on Twitter or Threads at Jake L. Fischer, at Your Man Devine.
Sure.
Subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on, and leave us a 5-star review. I thank you for listening. I thank you for putting up with my nonsense. And I hope you come back next week for another edition of No Cap Room.